Welcome to this webinar on the 10 Keys to Happier Living. It's a framework that I developed for a social movement in the UK, which I'll explain more about. But it's how do we, it wasn't developed specifically for challenging times, but it's interesting to see how it can apply in this context. So this is part of a Strategies to Thrive webinar series brought to you by the University of Pennsylvania Masters of Applied Positive Psychology alumni group. So all of us putting in some time to help share some ideas and thoughts for people to help them cope during quite difficult times. I mean, my background, I'm an organisational consultant, worked in many different organisations around the world, and I'm the lead psychology expert for Action for Happiness, which I'll tell you a little bit about. And my work is taking the science of well-being, the science of flourishing, and making that really practical and usable for people in their everyday lives. And I focus on workplaces and I focus on communities. And I'm really interested in questions about how can we design in happiness to our lives, into our organizations? How can we catalyze greater sort of flourishing in our sort of institutions and communities? So Action for Happiness, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a social movement. It's based in the UK. It was founded around 9 years ago, and it's got a real global reach. So we have members in 180 countries. We have 180,000 members, and we have a social media community, which is really active, and it's about 1.4 million people. And we tend to focus, I mean, the aim is to get the science-based ideas to help people build a happier and kinder society together. And it may sound like that's a kind of pie in the sky idea, but actually this person here, if you can see my cursor, is Richard Layard. He's Professor Lord Richard Layard. He's one of the leading economists, and he was the lead founder of Action for Happiness. And he's been one of the leading proponents of actually, as economies, as societies, when we think about progress, we should be thinking more broadly than just GDP or just financial measures of progress, but we need to include well-being measures too. And he's been very instrumental in getting governments sort of to start to pay attention to that stuff. And at a policy level, it's slow, but it's happening. So we work from the top down, from Richard's work, from the bottom up, from inspiring individuals to take action, and I will say from the middle out. So thinking about how people can take action in schools, in their communities, in their workplaces, and more broadly. So that's Action for Happiness. And it's almost like, and I think this is really pertinent right now, it's like we've been living in this rat race. We've been running a rat race, but it's almost like we've forgotten what it really means to be part of the human race, and what do we human beings need to really flourish. And it's interesting at this time, which is very, very difficult for many people, but it's also, people are starting to connect with you know, some of the sort of more fundamentals in life. And in fact, there was a study done, a research poll done in the UK fairly recently that said only 9% of people actually wanted to go back to the world as it was pre-lockdown. So we're still in lockdown here in the UK. So I want to sort of really play with this word for a minute, this word happiness, because we're called Action for Happiness. It's a controversial word, and you can argue at this time, I mean, is that too kind of frivolous a word to be used? Well, actually, if you look at the ingredients, the things that contribute to living a happier life, actually the ingredients for that are pretty much the same as what enables us to have well-being and what enables us to build resilience. And I actually tend to use those words interchangeably. And science is showing that actually we can learn skills and tools and techniques and habits and practices that can actually help us not only just survive, but thrive. I love this quote from John Kabat-Zinn, who many of you will know is the founder of sort of secular mindfulness. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And in terms of the sort of the word happiness, there are technical definitions, as many of you on the call on the webinar will know, in the sort of psychological literature. There's no singular definition. But I like this kind of practical working sort of way of describing it. this is Matthew Ricard, who's said to have the happiest brain on the planet, because he's a lot of the early neuroscientific studies on meditation were done on his brain. And he's got a kind of different brain to all of us. But he describes happiness as a deep sense of flourishing. It's more than a pleasurable feeling. I mean, when we throw this word happiness around, we often talking about pleasure. But actually, if we dig down, and I ask people all the time, what does happiness mean to you? What really is happiness? People say pleasure and that, the enjoyable things, but very soon they get to things that are deeper, more of a deep sense of flourishing, things that lead to fulfillment. I mean, the ancient Greeks talked about two sorts of happiness: hedonia, hedonism, pleasure. And you can have too much of a good thing, as our word hedonism suggests. But they also talked about a form of happiness called eudaimonia, which is about this sense of fulfillment and living a full life, recognizing that life has ups and downs, and that's part of it. But how do we grow? How do we become, a sort of, we live to the best of our potential in that life? And that's what we think is a working definition. So definitions aside, and scientists love definitions, but what's really the clues in the name of the social movement of Action for Happiness is actually about action. So what actions can people take? What are the actions that the science shows can actually contribute to people living a happier life? Well, this is where the 10 keys to happier living came in. It's a framework that when Action for Happiness was first getting off the ground, before it was launched in 2011, I was volunteering. I just finished my Masters of Positive Psychology degree at the University of Pennsylvania and got involved. And if we called Action for Happiness, we've got to make, what can we tell people? What does the science show people can do that makes a difference? And we came up with these areas. These are the 10 key areas. They're not the only areas, but they are ones that the science strongly shows that taking action can make a difference for our own well-being and that of others. And the acronym you may have spotted there is called is Great Dream. And this is, I mean, it's really been very interesting for me. I came up with that sort of in a sort of flash, if you like, as these things tend to come to people. But I think the acronym has really helped this kind of catalyze action, which is literally catalyze action around the world, which is, I mean, very humbling and inspiring. But it's interesting that the power of an acronym. We're going to share a little bit, we're going to dig into these now shortly, but I just wanted to share that. And it's kind of interesting, the acronym Great Dream, because who doesn't dream of being happy? Who doesn't want to live a happier life? And who doesn't want to live in a happier society? So it's a great dream for us as an organization as well. So just to reassure you that those areas, they might seem kind of very high level, and they are high level, but beneath them are thousands and thousands and thousands of individual studies. Many of those suggest different sorts of interventions, and we'll tap into a few of those today. But there's a lot beneath those things. And so created the original framework in 2010-11, and then updated it for the book, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, in 2016. And the science is growing all the time. So what's in this framework then? What is this, the 10 keys to happier living? So I'm going to tap into each one of these shortly with this is a whistle-stop tour. We're doing just tiny tasters, but hopefully it might inspire action. It might, give you food for thought, and I'll give you some resources where you can find out more shortly. So first things to say, this is a menu. It's not a prescription. Different people need different things at different times, but you can regard it as a sort of checklist or a toolbox. What am I doing already that's maintaining my well-being? Is there anything else I could try? When I'm feeling a bit kind of like I need a boost, is there anything here that I can take inspiration from? So, and then you'll notice that some of the things, particularly things on within the great, are things that we can do in the outside world that affect how we feel on the inside. And most of the things on the right-hand side, on the dream, are things that are more internal habits and practices that affect how we feel and also then how we engage with the world. So it's really important that this is, that we do you know, you don't have to do all of these. You don't need all these, but actually just, you know, they may inspire action. And as I said, they can help as a checklist for you to think about what you're doing already. So I'm going to ask you to do that as we get through. So I'm going to tap on each one, give you a few ideas. We can have a discussion at the end. You can ask some questions. But as we're going through these, reflect about, what do I do in this area for my own well-being? What am I doing right now in this current situation in the pandemic? And, you know, is there anything else I'd like to try? So, yeah, just reflect on that as we're going through. So what you'll also notice about this framework, as out of the 10 keys, the 10 key areas that we can take action in to live happier lives, the first two, so a fifth of the framework, are all about other people. They're about our connections with other people. And this is a really interesting to reflect on at the moment, at a time when many of us are in countries where we're required to be physically different. And I'm changing, in the UK, the government's using the term social distancing, but I'm trying, part of a campaign, if you like, that are trying to shift that to physical distancing, because although we can't be with our friends and family, many of us, we can still stay socially connected. And being socially connected is fundamentally important for our social well-being, whether you are, for our psychological well-being, whether you are introvert or extrovert. We all need to feel, there's a core psychological human need. We're a social species. There's a human need to feel seen, feel connected to feel cared for and care for other people. Now, you know, we may have different kind of sizes of social circles. Some people are with, you know, 2 or 3 kind of close, you know, people that they're close to. Other people prefer to have a wider network. Doesn't matter, but feeling seen, feeling connected, feeling there are people that care for you and that you can care for is a vital psychological ingredient. So at this time of physical distancing, one of the first things, and when we first went into that in the UK, I thought about, you know, who should be on my people list, if you like. Who are the people that I really want to make sure I stay in contact with? I mean, often, you know, in normal life, a lot of this happens sort of just by habit or, you know, serendipity, whatever, somebody rings us up. But in this time, I think we have to be a lot more intentional. So who are on your people list? So who, you know, family and friends that you want to make sure you're staying in contact with, colleagues, neighbors. And particularly the question here is, who is on their own or vulnerable? So who from those lists do you know that is on their own or vulnerable at this time? Because those are, you want to stay in contact with all of the core people, but particularly those people you know who are maybe more isolated, or they may be living in a different country, not the home country. So who might need just a little bit, you know, more kind of TLC, and thinking about how and when are you going to stay in contact with them. So I think this is about being very intentional. And a lot of us now are using technology, and thank God we've got technology to stay in contact with people. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but here's a few ideas of ways to stay connected that I've been experiencing or playing with. So firstly, I'm saying I'm not going to talk a lot about social media. Happy to ask questions about that later. But when we're thinking about our social media use, and many of us spending a lot of time online, is actually, how much of that are we using to really kind of nurture our social connections, rather than just doodling through, doom scrolling. I love that term, doom scrolling, through looking at the news or looking at celebrities. Now, celebrities probably aren't really going to worry whether you stay in contact with them or not. But your great aunt might, or your cousin who's living on their own will really notice if you stay in contact with them. So really think very consciously about using your social media to be social. I'm thinking about what other signs that you can send to show people that people are cared for. And these sorts of photos are some things that I've experienced. So I've actually had suspected COVID-19. They're not testing in the UK, but I was pretty flawed for a few weeks in March. And I was on my own for 2.5 weeks. And it was really nice because I was getting these little kind of texts and calls from people, and somebody I know, somebody's part of my book club, dropped me a message and said, Vanessa, do you fancy some cauliflower and chickpea curry? And I said, oh, well, that would be nice. Yeah, it'd be really nice. I'm really up to cooking. And then an hour later, there was this package arrived on my doorstep with homemade curry, homemade naan bread, homemade raita, a little card, a little napkin, just dropped on my doorstep, and she disappeared. And it was just so lovely to receive and really feel cared for. And that then inspired me, because then we went into Easter and I bought this huge bag of little tiny chocolate eggs, which are quite big in the UK, because I was going to be going to stay with some friends and their kids love chocolate eggs, blah, blah, blah. But of course, we weren't going away, and I certainly didn't want to eat all these myself. So I dug through my cupboards and found these little bags and some tissue and stuff. So I made up all these little parcels to drop around my street. So somebody in my street at the start of lockdown created a WhatsApp group, which has been fantastic. And through that WhatsApp group, we've kind of found out who's on their own, who's isolated, who's shielding, so can't go out at all, who's elderly. And some of those people aren't on WhatsApp. So through the kind of people that are on the group, we each know our kind of neighbours in our immediate vicinity, which has been great. So through I dropped these little packages of eggs on all the people in the WhatsApp group and the other kind of isolated people's doorstep, which was really nice. I got some lovely messages. And then I got this back a few weeks later. This is last weekend. Somebody, nice vintage tea plate with some homemade flapjacks and tea bags to have kind of afternoon tea, and a little hand-drawn card, which is just so lovely, just so that you like boost your day. And this, I've been sending lots of letters. I've been receiving cards, postcards from friends, and just particularly friends that, you know, especially older people, I think, who aren't on social media, aren't as active, or, you know, digitally enabled, is, you know, sending little, you know, snail mail things. It's so nice to receive a card, a thoughtful card through the post. To think about some of those things I sent. I happened to have some packets of seeds that I sent out to some friends that I know who are in particularly difficult circumstances and who love their gardens. But even our, you know, where probably many of us are receiving kind of, you know, memes and videos, but actually being kind of really thoughtful and curating those for friends and sending, you know, finding uplifting things for that, you know, particular friends will like, just shows that you care. So really simple, but really nice ways to stay in contact. The other one, the other kind of key, the first key, in fact, is around giving and doing kind things for others. And this has been something, I don't know where you are, but certainly it's been very apparent around where I live, and certainly in the news, both the London-based, I'm in London, London-based news and more widely, that there's been so many wonderful examples, small and larger, of people doing kind things for others. Because of course, when we do kind things for others, not only does it take our minds off our own worries, it helps to create the sorts of communities that we want to live in, communities where people can, you know, feel safe and trusted and feel that they belong. But there's also neuroscience is showing that when we do kind things for others, not only is it nice for the person we're doing the kind thing for, but actually activates the reward centers in our own brains. So, and we know that when people feel happier, they're more likely to help others. So it's a kind of, I always think about this as a virtuous circle. So if we're happier, we help people, and if we help other people more, it helps us to become happier. And I'm quite interested and influenced by evolutionary psychology, and I think this kind of really makes sense, because we evolved to live in kind of social groups as human beings, and so this really helps our those social groups, you know, rub along together. And of course, and when, you know, when we are living in uncertain times, when we're feeling anxious or worried, in our more primitive emotional brains, that triggers the threat system. But when we reach out and connect with other people, that actually triggers another emotional system, often sort of, you know, colloquially referred to as the calm and connect system. So it helps us calm down and kind of soothes our worries and helps us feel better. And I think this is what's also quite interesting about this, is that if we know that helping someone else activates the reward centers in the helper's brain, then sometimes, you know, when I find this quite encouraging in terms of actually being more willing to ask for help. And I don't know about you, but I often feel sometimes that I can't reach out for help because I don't want to trouble people. I know people are busy. It may seem silly. It may show that I'm, you know, not as strong or whatever as I like. But actually, when we reach out to others, it's a form of connection. It's saying that we value their help, and actually it's giving them an opportunity to boost their own well-being. So maybe think about in this time, as well as helping other people, how can you ask other people to help you? And certainly that was the case when I was not well, because you know, I reached out through the WhatsApp group, and it, you know, took a little bit of courage, because it's not, you know, it's not necessarily something that I'm normally very independent. But actually to ask for help when I needed stuff from the pharmacy, etc. And it was also a really nice thing if you've got elderly people in your street to actually ask them for a little bit of support in some small way that you know that they can manage, because that actually makes them feel engaged and connected. And certainly the case, this is Vera, my next door neighbor, and she lives on her own. Her partner died probably 8 years ago, and she's pretty sort of well, it can be socially isolated, and particularly at this time when technically she's not supposed to be going out, although she does break the rules a bit. And we happened to find out it was her 87th birthday last Tuesday, and she's got no one to send her a card. She's literally has no one. So this took 10 minutes to organise. So myself and a neighbour just said, it's Vera's next birthday next week, what can we do? And we've got a few musicians in the street. So we just organised a really simple thing at 4:30 on her birthday to come gather in the street, get her out, play happy birthday to her. I mean, there's a couple of real professional musicians, so what an honour. My partner John made cakes, his first attempt at baking, which was delicious. And we made her a birthday cake. We had a socially distanced tea with neighbours, which was lovely, because some of the neighbours who were also physically, you know, shielding, you know, they were able to stand out, and we delivered cake. And what was really beautiful is we received this card from Vera the day later. And she said, I just want you to know that yesterday was the nicest birthday present I have ever had or could have. I wish I could tell everybody there, which of course we have, because I've shared this with everybody, which actually even makes me teary even talking about it. But that was such a small thing, but it made a big, really big difference for Vera, a really boost for her well-being. And it was a really lovely kind of way of bringing people together, albeit 6 feet or 2 meters apart. So I'll just leave with this thought is, I love this, you know, quote from the Dalai Lama, be kind whenever possible, and it's always possible. So think at this time, when can you be kind when are your opportunities to be kind? And just any tiny little moment of kindness, it doesn't have to be a big thing, can really make a difference to other people, and you know, and that makes a difference to you. So just a couple of other thoughts and ideas on this, and I'm spending a little bit longer on the kind of the other people piece, the, you know, the giving and the relating, because they're so important. 5 to 1. This is a ratio from John Gottman for those of us who are locked in our houses with our nearest and dearest, or our roommates or flatmates, depending on which side of the pond you're on. And, you know, sometimes, you know, with the best will in the world, we can kind of rub each other up the wrong way. But John Gottman, who's one of the, well, he's the foremost relationship psychologist, discovered, and this was with married couples or romantic partners, but I think this can apply more broadly, that the sort of the relationships that people were sort of happiest and highest quality relationships, their ratio of kind of pleasant, positive interactions to negative ones was a ratio of 5 to 1. So these are tiny micro intervention, just the interactions, you know, smiling, just showing somebody a little bit of attention or care, or, you know, saying thank you, those sorts of things, rather than criticizing, or, you know, which is, you know, sometimes it takes work to get that balance, but it's really interesting about being conscious of this when we're spending more time with the people in our houses. So sometimes it means just really cutting people some slack. And so that can make all the difference. Is okay, you know, they're not stacking the dishwasher in the way that you like it. Doesn't matter, they're stacking the dishwasher, say thank you. So food for thought. My other half is on the line, so he's going to give me feedback to how well I'm doing on this ratio when we get off, I'm sure. So and another thought on this, I thought this was such a lovely idea. So this is from primary schools in the UK, and it started out, this is the school that somebody I know's son goes to, and the school asked each of the students, who of course aren't in school at the moment, who are at home, to each draw a picture of themselves with outstretched arms, and then the school send them into school. And the school then put them on the gates, showing, so all the children are holding hands, and then sent out pictures. And this is a different school that took up that idea and did it. And I thought it was such a lovely way of making kids feel still connected to their school community, even though they're physically part. And you could even do that, get kids doing that for their families or their friends and things. I just thought it was a lovely idea. So I'm sharing some of these ideas that just, they might be things that you could just take up and do, or they might spark other ideas. If they spark other ideas, I'd love to hear about them, or if you try these, to hear about them. So anyway, so we're moving on. So we're going on to the A in great. And this is about awareness and about living life mindfully. So many of us will have tried mindfulness meditation, will be certainly used to the concept. So I'm not going to go into that in detail here. There are other webinars that cover that. But I think this is a time when we're only going outside for short periods of time, or if we're stuck inside looking out of the window, is actually how can we really make the most of those moments. And I really like these ideas. In the UK, we're allowed to go out for one period of exercise a day, walking. I'm walking at moments I can't run because I've had COVID. Really trying to make those walks count. So whether that's looking for particular colours, listening to the bird song, and just starting to notice things. I mean, it's been spring, so it's been really beautiful. And I just found myself taking photos, and these are some photos I took in my local park, which is a really beautiful plant that I'd not really noticed before. And I started looking at it, and then I noticed the snail, and I zoomed in on the snail, and I just thought, God, those are really beautiful. And ordinarily, if I was walking through the park at all, I'd be on my phone, or I'd be, mind somewhere else. So actually just taking that time to really notice that sort of being really mindful. And here, even in London, there's been so few planes that the bird song's been extraordinary, and it's just been lovely to actually sit and listen to that sometimes. So that's just taking time to really notice, to be mindful about what we're focusing on. Now, all of these keys, I should say, because there's a whole lot of stuff around mindful meditation and other ways of being mindful on the website, in the book, which I'll talk about later. And I'm not going to talk much about exercising, because you all know about exercising, but I am going to say that when sitting for long periods of times, which many of us are doing more because we're not doing those short walks that we normally do to the tube station or to the subway station, or even to the car park to pick up a car, because we're locked inside. So we're actually moving less, and moving is really, really, really important for our minds, not just the kind of aerobic exercise or weight training exercise, which of course we need to be doing, but actually just being moving. So why don't you stand up now and just do a little stretch. I can't see you, I don't think, but just do a bit of a stretch. So maybe even you might want to set your alarm, when you're sitting for your period at desk, just to move a bit, to actually get the blood flowing. You'll find it really does help your mind and help you kind of stay flexible and physical. And here, so Oriana's saying she's really enjoying her daily walks with her dogs. Countless pictures of jacarandas, plants and things are catching her eye. Slightly more aware mind. It's really funny how it has been kind of, our minds have been more aware since this time. So that's great. I mean, I think, I'm even contemplating getting a dog, not for right now, but because I think it would be a good thing to help me enjoy the being out more. So that's A. In the T in great is about trying out and keeping learning new things. And this is really, so our brain really, it's a question of use it or lose it. And I love this phrase, beware a person, I'm gender neutralizing the quote, beware the person who says they've got 20 years experience when they've really got 1 year's experience repeated 20 times. And I love that idea because actually trying out, exploring new things really keeps our brains active and engaged. And it's a really important thing right now. Many of us are working in a way we didn't have to work. You know, this is the first kind of, it's not the first webinar I've done, it's the first kind of UPenn one I've done, learning to use Zoom, learning to use different technologies, you're learning to communicate with people in a different way. And it can be frustrating because you don't always get it right. But it's but it's really great. It's just I love this phrase, so when we try new things, and I can get very frustrated with trying out new technology, but I love adding the word yet to it. I'm no good at this yet. I'm not good at this yet. I can learn, I can get better. And this is also a time when, we can actually get a little bit creative. We can perhaps be a bit more playful. Even if we're struggling a bit, it might be a time that we can actually find losing ourselves in sort of creative pursuits or hobbies, learning to knit, learning to cook in different ways, can really help us take our mind off things. And I know in lockdown for many people, it can be a bit monotonous. Several people that I've been talking to have been saying, oh God, it's just like, how do we mix it up? And a few weeks ago when we went into this, we set our routines because it's great to have a routine, but actually, and we were doing some things for our well-being, but they're getting a bit stale. And actually, it's really important when you're doing things for your well-being is actually to mix it up. And certainly the research suggests that, for example, when we do doing kind acts to people, when people were asked to do kind acts for people over a number of weeks, those that did a variety of different ways of being kind actually got the bigger boost from it. So, and I love this experiment. This comes from Ellen Langer, who's a psychologist at Harvard. She was a lovely experiment which I like to share, where she had some classical musicians. And classical musicians are, trained to play to really high skill, and they often have sort of fixed repertoires or fixed pieces, classical movements, classical pieces of, I'm clearly not a musician because I can't think of the term, but it is 8 o'clock or 8:30 on a Friday night. So she had these classical, the musicians in a classical orchestra to play a piece that is part of their standard repertoire. So they played it hundreds and hundreds of times. She got them to play it, recorded it, and then she asked them to play the same piece, but she asked each musician to change something tiny that only they would know. So clearly it couldn't be something that was going to mean the whole piece fell together. They still had to do the performance. So they did that performance where each of them was changing something tiny that only they would know. And that was recorded. And then both those recordings were played to audiences. They mixed up the audio. They played them in to the audiences. And they asked the audiences to play to rate the performances, the quality of the performance. And they asked the musicians to rate how much they enjoy playing. And they found that those performances where people, the orchestra were changing those minute things. They not only did the musicians and musicians enjoy those performances better, but they actually were rated to be the better performances. So those small changes can really make a big difference. So think about what those differences, what those mean for you. What small changes could you make in your routines to just spice it up a bit for yourself? Because variety can be the spice of life. So we talked through the first 5 keys. Great. So I asked you to think about things. You can put this in the chat or just reflect. I'm just going to put it there as a question to provoke thought. I mean, what of your current activities to maintain your well-being during lockdown are you doing in any of these areas? And maybe if there's something new that you could try. So feel free to share that in the chat, or we can talk about that afterwards. So yeah, so what are you doing to stay connected? What are you doing to be kind? What are you doing to take care of your body, to sleep, to eat well? How are you being mindful, and what new things have you learned or tried since lockdown, or are you looking forward to trying? So looking forward is really, really important. This idea of having some goals. I mean, Edwin Locke, who's a sort of goal psychologist, big names in goals psychology, say goals are how happiness happens. So some of us are more oriented to goals or not, but actually as human beings, we're goal directed beings. We many of us like to tick things off our to-do list. We like to feel a sense of progress. And I know in uncertain times that having, it might be that our goals for this year might, have to change, but we can actually reel this right back. What tiny goals? I mean, there's been Harvard research done, this is in workplaces, found that, the thing that made the difference between the best days and the worst days in the workplace, and I think this can apply equally at home, is feeling a sense of progress. So, each day, what's something you're looking forward to? What's something you want to tick off your to-do list? And just let's focus on micro goals right now, can help us, take one day at a time and get through the time and still feel those important, sense of focus, that sense of enjoyment. Setting a goal to, for a tiny micro goal for our well-being each day. For example, good strategies to have, and there's lots more in this in terms about nurturing optimism, and that which are in you can find out more on the website, books, etc. But I just think these micro goals right now are really, really more daily micro goals that encourage you to set that. As Oriana was saying, I've got lots of worthy plans and ideas what to do with the extra time. Hollow laugh. Well, that is actually, you haven't had extra time. And I think this is really interesting because I'm actually in the same boat. I'm feeling had all these plans of creativity and all that stuff. And actually I've been working quite a lot, which is lucky. And I've got to be doing sort of various administration things that I need to do. But yeah, so I think it's also being really conscious that, we can only do what we can do. And if have we got family to look after, many people are having to homeschool their kids. So not only are they working from home, they've got to look after the kids and find ways of cooking and things at home that they perhaps didn't do before. So we actually might have less time. But so what are these? That's why these micro goals are so important. So the R in Dream is about resilience. And actually, as I said right at the beginning, all of these keys, all of these things that boost how we feel are also keys for resilience. If you look at the resilience literature and the active ingredients, if you like, resilience, they are very similar to these 10 keys. But one thing that's particularly important is our habits and practices of thought. Albert Ellis, who was one of the founding fathers of cognitive behavioral therapy, says as human beings, we are remarkably good at disturbing ourselves. So human beings, not only have we got our sort of more emotional, more primitive sort of brain, has our fear centers, our joy centers, our sort of reward centers, but we've also got this amazing human forebrain, which is fantastic because it enables us to think and dream and plan and be creative and come up with strategies and all those things. But it's also really good at ruminating and catastrophizing, imagining the worst case scenarios. And what that is doing is actually triggering our own threat system. So Albert Ellis says, human beings remarkably good at disturbing ourselves. So part of this kind of a resilience kind of toolkit is actually noticing when we are ruminating, when we've got those worries going round and round and round our head, or when we're catastrophizing. It's very, very easy to do that at this time. And it's naturally, this is not feeling, saying that we should never feel worried, never feel anxious, never feel angry, never feel sad. Those are, emotions are basically signals that we need that something's not right, and we need to take action to right it. So that, in themselves, they're not bad, but because our brains are basically designed to keep us physically safe, and our brains formed millions of years ago, well, I don't know, millions, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we were hunters and gatherers, when life was actually a lot riskier than it is today. We would face life and death on a daily basis, and that's what our kind of emotional centers are designed to do. So we have what are called, evolutionary psychologists call, sort of emotional false alarms. We will naturally spot what's wrong, dangers and risks, and get stuck in those and amplify those, which actually then can undermine our own well-being and resilience. So there are lots of strategies that you can learn to help you think more resiliently. But one really simple one that I am finding quite useful at this time is something I call changing the channel. So if you've got a worry that's going around your head, and you're, really kind of what's going to happen after this, a lot of, all these messages about the economy, whatever, which actually I would really recommend managing your news diet, as I said, and avoid doom scrolling, as I mentioned before. But when you've got these worries going around your head, don't try and suppress them. Don't try and push them away, but actually get them. Imagine they are being played out on a TV screen in front of you. You're the only person watching. You're there with all these worries on screen. But the great thing about a TV is you've got a remote control or a switch that you can change. So now imagine those worries being played out on screen. Imagine yourself changing the channel. Now bring to mind a scene where, from a place that you've been, you really enjoy being, that you feel really comfortable. Many of us have a sort of favorite place. I really love Greece, and I have a favorite place in a remote coastal area in Greece and there's a particular rock. I've been going to the same place for many years. Sit on the rock and I look out to see beautiful turquoise sea with nothing around me. And that literally is my happy place. So I imagine I've actually even got it as a screensaver. Sometimes on my phone, I've even got a recording of the sea. Imagine yourself being there. Bring that to mind. Put that on your TV channel. Really savor it. What can you see? What can you hear? What are the smells around? What are the colors? Really savor it. And now, when you're ready, you can change the channel again and bring yourself back into the present moment and start to focus on what you're doing. So it's a really, really simple thing that you can try that I find quite useful. So the E in DREAM is about emotions. And I've already mentioned this is about focusing particularly on sort of pleasant emotions. And this is actually quite important this time. So I've talked about the fact that our brains are kind of hardwired to focus on what's wrong, because that kept us safe when we were hunters and gatherers and our brains were forming. So our brains are hardwired to naturally notice what's right. So we have to sort of train our brains to actually notice the good things. And there's some classic positive psychology experiments, writing down 3 good things each night before you go to bed, classic ones. But there is a whole range of pleasant emotions. Here's just 10 of the classic ones. So during this time of lockdown, thinking about, and this could tie into your kind of daily micro goals, is thinking about kind of how can you kind of just induce some positive emotions. I actually prefer the word pleasant emotions, because unpleasant emotions can be positive, but pleasant emotions, how can you introduce some pleasant emotions, drip feed into your day? Because when we're in a pleasant emotional state, it opens our minds. We're more flexible in our thinking. We're more adaptive. We're more open to connecting with others, and little by little that builds our resilience. And there's even some suggestions from research studies that shows that a sort of drip feed, sort of pleasant emotional states, being in a sort of good, more pleasant mood, can actually help to boost our immunity, potentially boost our immunity. And there's certainly correlations in these studies shown between feeling sort of happier and higher, less likely to catch colds, etc. So it's worth thinking about at the moment. So I've been playing with these ideas of punctuating our days with what I'm calling positive pauses. And so there's been some research that shows that when we take a break, a 2-minute break during our days, if many of us are kind of, you know, spending all our days on Zoom or, you know, whatever we're doing, teaching kids or whatever, but when we take a 2-minute break, we are more productive for the next hour. So I'm playing with that idea, but also how can those breaks boost, give us a kind of drip feed of these more pleasant or positive emotions. So here's some ideas. Action for Happiness, one of the things we're suggesting people might do is set their phone's little buzz to take a 2-minute sort of quiet pause at 8 o'clock each day, but obviously you could do it whatever time you want. You could have a playlist of songs that you really enjoy that really kind of induce different kind of pleasant emotions, and you can have a range that you could kind of just tap into for a couple of minutes. You could go outside or look out the window and notice the beauty. You can spend time reflecting on the good things that are there in your day or in your life. You can actually take those couple of minutes to say thank you to someone perhaps, or reach out to someone. And I'm even loving these things. I discovered this the other day. I think it comes from the Kennedy Center. You can Google it. 5-minute African dance lesson. And there's like 2 or 3 videos, but it just literally 5 minutes to learn an African dance step. So how can you punctuate your days with some kind of positive pauses? So that's the E in dream. And the A is about acceptance and being comfortable with who you are. And this is really important at the moment, because that kind of natural negativity bias I talked to doesn't just apply to what's going on around us. It happens often to apply to how we kind of regard and treat ourselves. And there's a whole lot of science around self-compassion, but there's lots in the, on the website and the book you can go into. But think at this time, how can you be kind to yourself right now? So kindness doesn't just apply to what you do for other people. Being kind to yourself actually enables you to be kinder to other people. And at this time, most of us are kind of operating in environments and in ways that we're not used to. Again, we're trying to juggle lots of stuff, or we're trying to fill our days in different ways. So we must not, don't expect ourselves to be perfect. I love this cartoon. You know, we might expect perfection, but things go wrong, but we can still, kind of make something of that. But I would really encourage you to think about, how are you speaking to yourself? So notice yourself. So often when we are annoyed with ourselves, the way we speak to ourselves, the words we use, the tones we use is much harsher than it would be if we were talking to somebody else when they've messed up. So just pause and notice, and just maybe say to yourself, okay, Vanessa, or okay, Oriana, or okay, Raphael, or okay, John, you're doing your best you can. You're not the only person that messes up. You're not, you're learning, you're trying your best. So just be kind, because this isn't a time for perfection. This is the time to be kind. And we can also look to think about, who are some of the heroes that are around at the moment? Who are the people that we're finding inspiring, and what qualities do they signal that think about in ourselves? So this is a great opportunity to think about, well, what is the best qualities in me? What are the qualities that I have that contribute to kind of creating sort of greater happiness right now for myself and for others? And how can I just bring those to the fore? How can I focus on those? And if you're finding, some of us find it very hard to focus on our sort of positive qualities, but then maybe think about some of the kind of people that have been talked about in your community or on your local news channels that are doing great things, and how can you be inspired those to find some of the best qualities inside yourself? And I don't know whether people that aren't in the UK haven't heard of this guy. This is Captain Tom. I keep clicking on things, and my learning capabilities on Zoom. Captain Tom, who's 100 years old last week, and in the lead up to his 100th birthday, he wanted to raise some money for our health system during COVID-19. So he was going to do 100 laps around his garden. You can see he's got a cane and a walking frame. And he put out there, his family helped him put on a Just Giving page to kind of raise some money. And he set out to raise £1,000. And he ended up, this story got shared, and he was such a lovely character. He ended up raising £32 million, which is extraordinary. and got, you know, recognition from the Queen and all sorts of stuff. So it's just a lovely, lovely story. So what is it about Captain Tom or people like him that can really inspire us to do what we can, to be the best that we can? So the M finally is about meaning. This is about connecting to something bigger than ourselves. You know, at times like this, we can get caught up in our own heads. We can get locked into our own minds, and particularly if we're on our own, you know, we can, our worlds can become very small. But this is about something about how can we connect and contribute something to that's to something more than ourselves. And of course, then it connects to the G in great giving. So thinking about that at this time, you know, what are the things that really matter for you? What are the things that give meaning to your life? What are the ways that you connect to something bigger than yourself? And we know that from the research, there are some studies that suggest that when people are clear on some key sources of meaning in their life, be that friends and family, sort of hobbies and passions, volunteering, whatever those things are, creative pursuits, people who are clear on the sources of meaning in their life actually have greater resilience, because it shows us that there's more to life than the current issues. And I really like this, I'm using this quite a lot at the moment, is that at this moment, you know, there's loads of things we could be doing, but what are the things that really matter for us and the people around us and our communities, and what are the things that are in our control? And that's where we might want to, at this time, the really challenging time, uncertain times, really focus there, because, you know, focusing on the things that we control, having a sense of control in our lives is in itself a source of well-being, a really important ingredient of well-being. So I'll leave you with this activity, and then we can have time for questions and any food for thought. So this is an activity I'm finding quite useful at the moment, to help put in a bit of perspective, to help get a sense of meaning, hope, and actually bring the best out in ourselves. So if you imagine yourself looking back from the future to now, so, you know, maybe you're a grandparent, and you're describing this time to your grandchildren, be that, you know, in 10 years time, 20 years time, 40 years time, whatever the time frames are. You know, what was it, how would you describe this time to them? How would you describe how you felt? What was your emotional journey, the ups and downs? And we'll all have ups and downs at this time. What was it that helped you and the people around you kind of come through it? And what did you learn about yourself, about work and life in general, that you've learned during this period that can help you beyond it? So, and what does that suggest to who you want to be, you know, how you want to be, and what you want to do, the tiny actions, so focus on tiny actions that you want to do right now. And it's a really kind of nice reflective activity, and it might be a really nice activity to journal about, actually, just do some free writing to help you think it through. That might be something you want to play with. So that's it. We've done a kind of turbo romp through the 10 keys. As I've said, there's a ton on the website. There's tons in the book. I'm going to point out a few things. There's lots of ideas, sort of evidence-based ideas for action. They call them interventions. But there's also, hopefully, these will catalyze creative ideas for yourself and inspire your own thoughts on what will make a difference. So one of the things that we use quite a lot of Action Habits is this phrase, which is, the world is changed by your example, not your opinion. This is about taking action, however tiny. And if you want to find out more, here's the book. This is the book for adults. It's kind of really easy to use, bits on the science, bits on the different ideas for actions and reflections. It's designed to be dipped in as a navigator. This is the cover, it's a new cover actually for the ebook, if anybody's interested in that. There's also a book for kids, which might be useful for those of you who've got kids at home at the moment. So this is based as 10 chapters, one for each of the key, but apparently 7 to 11-year-olds like big numbers. So it's called 50 Ways to Feel Happy. So there's, you know, roughly 5 actions per action ideas, activities per key, but the kids can learn about happiness. So beautiful illustrations by Celeste Ayres, who's an Argentinian illustrator. So both of those are available on Amazon and other good booksellers. But other things, that free resources, Action for Happiness website has lots of free resources. Oriana's popped up into the channel. She loved the Action for Happiness app that keeps telling her whatever she's done each day is enough, which is lovely. So we do these monthly calendars. They started out a volunteer an idea to a kindness calendar in the lead up to Christmas a couple of years ago, and then people wanted them for each month. So we now do them for each month. So we're now in Meaningful May. You can download this if you go to actionforhappiness.com, .org, sorry, actionforhappiness.org. I'll give you the website at the end. /calendars, you'll see the calendars. You can download these, print them off, share them. And they're being translated into multiple different languages, again, by volunteers each month. So this Meaningful May has been translated into 24 different languages there, which is amazing. Beautiful, just tiny actions, and the app does these as well. We've also got a general, this is only in English, but it's very similar to the Active April calendar, which Active Coping April calendar, which is translated into different languages. But if you want a general thing, you know somebody that's struggling, these could be lovely things to just share with people, and you can then even share how you're doing with your actions. If you're sharing it with friends and family, it might be a lovely way of connecting with people. But these are all for free on the website. Our mantra for this period is keep calm, stay wise, be kind. To tap into kind of our inner self, or what's good for our well-being, what's good for others' well-being. And I'm really open to having any questions in the chat. And as Oriana said, there's an Action for Happiness app that if you go on to actionforhappiness.org, you can find out about. We're about to launch a free 10-day Taking Action for Happiness little program that's done via email. It's really, really nice. So keep an eye out for that. Sign up as an Action for Happiness member. It's free. It doesn't matter. You get a newsletter with loads of interesting resources, and obviously you can connect with us on social media. So my Twitter account is @ChangeSpace, and I'm a newbie on Instagram, and seem to have various accounts, but King on the Rock is one at the moment. It's moderate, just marginally more active than the others. But that's it from me. Thank you very much to everybody for joining me.